risk is just a mechanism to get to a certain outcome. I think like taking the most comfortable path is actually a different form of risk. You just call it something else. It is a form of assuming that our current systems that we are operating under will continue to exist, will continue to stagnate, and Google will continue to be Google, and there wouldn't be OpenAI that comes in or Claude that comes in to disrupt their core business model. And all of that is just fundamentally untrue. Anyone that is looking for like less risk, just overarchingly, that's usually where I see part archetypes where they say, I want to follow a path that someone else told me to follow.
Welcome to the Tao of Chow podcast, where we will try to find balance and provide a clearer path forward in this uncertain world.
Lily Vitoyarusko, Water Lily's CEO and co-founder, started college at 14, and by 16, she was venturing into a career in aerospace engineering as an intern at NASA. However, that same year, her life took a dramatic turn when her aunt, who raised her and was a cornerstone in her first-generation immigrant family, was diagnosed with terminal stage colon cancer. The ensuing financial and emotional devastation, exacerbated by her family's lack of preparedness, tore permanent rifts in her family and compelled her to pivot her career from aerospace to a lifelong dedication to building solutions in healthcare. Fueled by personal tragedy and a resolve to forge change, Lily graduated from UC Berkeley with a bachelor's degree in genetic and data science and led product and engineering at multiple startups before founding Water Lily. And here is Lily. Lily, thank you so much for joining me today and be my guest. This is something I've been looking forward to since the last time we spoke. And so thank you and welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you again for reaching out to me.
Yeah, thank you. And today is, and I can't help myself, it's Lunar New Year 2026 on the 17th of February. And so we wish everybody who watch this or listen to this a happy Year of the Horse. So I got to know you, Lily, through LinkedIn, if you recall. And I read a post that you put, and I felt compelled to reach out to you because the story was really fascinating, touching, and you were kind enough that somebody like me just went out of just came out with a message on LinkedIn, and that you were willing to connect, and ultimately, of course, willing to spend time today with me. So again, thank you. Lily, I know there are many bits of podcasts or interviews that you have done over the last few years. And it is not a secret about your passion in what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And in some shallow way, we all know something happened in your life that made you so committed in the direction that you have been taking. But I'd like to understand you more, and to understand the motivation and understand determination, really. So if you don't mind, share a little bit more detail. I know I read that you went to college at 14, and I'm just not smart enough. So I went 4 years later than you, 18. And then you, because of certain issues that happen, and you end up not only changing your major in college, your direction and your career path or your proposed career path into something totally different. So I appreciate learning a little bit about your family. I know that long last name of yours, which I always have problem pronouncing, which you were so kind to allow me to pronounce it the way that I pronounced it, I believe is from Thailand at one time, or your ancestor. If you can tell us a little bit about your family and tell me a little bit about your I guess you're immigrant or you were born here, but your history will be really helpful.
Yeah, I could definitely do that so you understand who I am, the way I think, because that will then not only help us understand what we designed and the intention behind it, but what is a continued intention, what is a continued innovation as we partner with a variety of incredible and powerful institutions to improve how we age. So my last name is Thai. My dad is from Thailand. My mom is from Cambodia. And they were the ones that initially immigrated over to the US when they were very, very young. It actually came out of necessity. I think a lot of
Yes.
really powerful stories come out of necessity, things that we didn't choose. And so in my parents' case, my mom was my mom experienced a Cambodian genocide when she was quite young. And so she needed to escape. She's actually a war refugee that came
Mm,
here,
mm,
and my father's family, that who was formerly wealthy, also lost all of their wealth due to the nearby wars as well.
mm,
And so both my parents came to the States without a penny to their name and started to build small businesses. And when they met each other, got married, started a family. I am the youngest of four. And my first real taste of responsibility was not a exam assessments really. It was working at my parents' factory when I was 5,
mm,
and I learned very early on just how hard work and the value of it is so necessary to survival and to our family survival. And I've learned to deeply appreciate blue collar jobs as well
mm,
from that experience. And I live a completely different life, but I feel so grateful for it. And I also know how difficult it is to kind of move up in economic status and all that you have to kind of, put into it. So I knew very, very early on the value of a dollar, how
mhm.
hard it is to get it. It doesn't matter if you work a 9 to 5 job. It's a matter of, is someone willing to purchase the good that you produced, essentially. And so I knew early on that I wanted to improve our prospects. My parents have always taught me, be a good person, but work so hard. That is going to be your differentiating factor, is how incredibly hard you work from our perspective passed on to you.
Mm.
And in your kind of new and better position, what can you do for others around you as well, and how can you scale that impact? And so for myself, I knew I needed to build a career early on, and two, I just couldn't help but be fascinated with innovation and building things. When I was 12, I was recognized by NASA in a national competition. For a form of like rocket building. And I ended up winning the competition. They flew me out to the Kennedy Space Center, and from there, they put you on a fast track to essentially begin your career at NASA. So I ended up, of course, having my mentors, and then having a full time internship when I was 16. And unfortunately, that path was cut quite short because my aunt, who was a really integral part of our first generation immigrant family, she actually also escaped with my mom and helped work for the family factory under the same roof. She was diagnosed with terminal stage colon cancer, and from there, a lot of the stability that we built for ourselves from our own hands was just quickly getting torn apart from financially how much we had to pay for her care over the years, as well as the family relationships that we weren't unfortunately able to maintain, our extended family that we haven't spoken to in over a decade, because we didn't we weren't educated enough, and we didn't have enough tools to have a thoughtful conversation that helped everyone realize that we're doing our best.
Mm.
We're trying to make the best decisions, not one person is trying to take advantage of the other. I think it's very easy when you feel so frustrated to pit each other against one another. And unfortunately, that is so common on this topic. So that was a little bit about my trajectory of just going into aerospace engineering. Went to college early for it. Of course, it's financially beneficial for me to go to college as early as possible,
Right.
as well for someone that paid for my own college. But that experience made me pivot from aerospace into the healthcare industry and build my technical background in genetics and AI. I've been at the forefront of that intersection and realized that this topic hasn't been solved for. So I took all of my experiences leading product and engineering at multiple early stage companies to build Water Lily very intentionally, with the right perspective and with the right skill set at this point.
Wow, fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. And so many thoughts go through when you were talking about your typical classic immigrant family, hardworking. Many are blue collar,
Mhm.
um, many hours a day. Um, but it's really the collective. It's together as a family, helping
Mhm.
each other. I know, for example, my wife, who's from an immigrant family, and they used to in the weekend sort bottles because they ran grocery stores. In the old days, you had to clean up all the Coca-Cola bottles so you can return them for whatever, a nickel a bottle, whatever it is. So they have always worked. Age is not an issue. Whatever age doesn't matter. And that type of perspective is very difficult to maintain as we thrive in the society and get better standard of living. And we think that it's better for our next generation to don't have to go through that type of experience. And I would submit to you, we end up raising very soft children, and that they don't appreciate or understand, not because we did not make them understand, we did not cause them to understand, out of making ends meet, livelihood, all those important values that a immigrant family have no choice. And
Mhm.
they just did what they have to do because they have a commitment and love for their family, and they want to survive and thrive in this newfound country. Third generation is a very different place. And anyways, I think that a wonderful story. Um, so along that line, how do you think about? I don't know. May I ask you a personal question? Do you have children, or you don't have children?
I don't have
Okay.
children.
If one day you have children, how would you preserve those values? How would you think about
Mhm.
continuing, um, bittersweet actually, um,
Yeah.
things forward so that you actually helping the next generation to appreciate and to thrive and to be self-reliant and still be in the collective?
Mhm. That's a really fantastic question. And it also begs a little bit of just, is it genetics or is it environmental factors um, that affect our trajectory in some way? And then also you could touch on, I use a little bit of the little nuance that I understand about kind of the difference between the two to build that thoughtfully into the platform as well, and predicting
Yeah.
what the future will look like. But to answer your question directly, I look at it in two ways. The first one is it's so incredibly important to teach those that are younger than us, that are going to have more powerful tools than us, who can inherently be smarter and better than us,
Mhm,
discipline and resilience. I
mhm.
think that's the only way incredible innovation is shaped, is through understanding how difficult it is to innovate and to fully see it through, and the compound and scaled positive effects of being able to do that. And so I think for me, practically, that looks like, one, you have to spend so much time with the children to even give them the nuance of knowledge that you have and the case studies that you had, to help give them examples of what does discipline or resilience even look like. It's not just telling them, here's the standard definition of it, versus um, they might have a completely different definition and different reality in what they sit in, versus telling them, here's an old reality of like what discipline means to me and how hard it was for me to develop that over the years, and how I needed to increase that the more ambitious my targets were, for example. Um, and so practically that means probably living a lifestyle that is more modest,
Yeah.
if I can, allowing that child to be exposed to the diversity of cultures and socioeconomic backgrounds. And being able to see that as closely, like firsthand, as possible, while of course, with the additional wealth and better upbringing, also give them resources and opportunities to try to make big bets themselves. That's like under a controlled experiment, whether they might want to be a famous tennis player or that they want to be a famous pianist, or other things like that. I think being an exceptional in any way, we can't discount how much discipline and resilience and work ethic it requires. And so learning failure early on is going to be very, very important, so that you kind of pull apart sort of, being wanting to just feel good all the time and do kind of go down a people pleasing sort of path, and you don't really know what you like, versus the more the more you put yourself to a program and you experience failures, it doesn't phase you when you experience failures. It's more about, well, what did I learn from that experience? Did I like what I learned? Do I want to continue learning in this way, or should I be adjusting?
So this, you bring up very, very important point. I have been an entrepreneur all my life, and you have as well. And I believe you will continue to be one. Regardless of how successful your business is going to be, you will continue to innovate. That's part of either your DNA, which will be basically you're born with it, or it became part of your DNA because you made it to be part of your DNA, the way that you think about it. So I cannot think of any entrepreneur who are successful or not even successful, take on that path requires an understanding that failure is the mother of success, and that failure is part of success. It's how you deal with failure. And as a result, we're talking about dealing with risk and the consequence of taking on those risks and believing in yourself and judgment and able to learn from it when mistakes happen, either because wrong assumptions or circumstance that cause it not to happen. Something I used to say that the people with wisdom can find the line between skill and luck. But the people who have, how should I say, humility, gives a lot more credit to luck than skill. When we're successful, a lot of times it's because we're lucky, not because we're exceptionally skillful. Because if we start thinking that we're the best, we have stopped learning. We're done, and we become our worst enemy. So I think that you have that natural trait. If not, you wouldn't be where you are now and where you will be in the future. So how do you preserve that risk-taking attitude, that comfort, if I may even use that word, because risk is never comfortable. And the more successful you are, actually the more risk you are taking, because you have reputational risk. You have a lot of other things. You say, well, I already achieved. Why do I want to take on more risk? I should just rest on my laurels and I should be okay. But I think that understanding risk and continue to take risk, not for the sake of taking risk, but to thrive and to reach the goal and the objective and the target. It's a necessary trait. And the question is, how does one preserve that trait when one becomes more comfortable and have experienced success?
I think that risk has a very negative reputation. When you hear of risk, you immediately want to feel bad. You feel this something drop in your stomach. When in truth, it's exactly like you mentioned. Risk is just a mechanism to get to a certain outcome. And so it is a necessary journey that you take in order to kind of get the outcome that you're looking for. How else are you going to? It's a form of measuring the benefits and consequences of each action that you take, or each kind of like strategy or tactic or whatever else. Risk is just like is just a measure of is an awareness of sort of that input-output sort of consequence, if that makes sense. And there are some systems that are very inefficient and very ineffective. Like you take an abnormally high risk anyways, and you don't understand fully, you either don't understand the full benefits and the likely benefits, or you don't understand the full consequences and the full consequences here. It's like many people who decide, oh, I'm going to choose the most de-risk path in some way. And what that means is like a form of like, I'll go to college and then I'll get a really good, big tech job, afterwards, and feel really comfortable. And all of that is a facade, I believe. I think like taking the most comfortable path is actually a different form of risk. You just call it something else. It is a form of assuming that our current systems that we are operating under will continue to exist, will continue to stagnate, and Google will continue to be Google, and there wouldn't be OpenAI that comes in or Claude that comes in to disrupt their core business model. And all of that is just fundamentally untrue. So anyone that is looking for like less risk, just overarchingly, that's usually where I see part archetypes where they say, I want to follow a path that someone else told me to follow. And usually doing it in not the most educated like way. And so just even assuming that there's any certainties in life is also inefficient evaluation of the risks that you decided to take on.
So uncertainty is the only thing that's perpetual,
That is correct.
right? And
Everything
so
always everything will always change.
exactly. And
It's a matter
so
of if you want to kind of react to that change. Sorry.
right,
It's almost it's as do you want to be a reactor to that change, or do you want to be the change that actually happens?
yes,
And those that are at the forefront have the most amount of insight into actually how the system operates and the red tape, the yellow tape, who you need to go to first to influence a movement and things like that.
yeah. So tell us a little bit about your business, Water Lily. What a beautiful name. And tell us a little bit about you mentioned your experience with your aunt
Mhm.
that tore your cohesive family or extended family sort of apart a little bit, and it was probably very difficult. And a lot of it probably has to do with money and willingness to support and willingness to sacrifice. And there may be some issue of entitlement.
Mhm.
And other, I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know if any of that's true.
Well, we could dive in.
Yeah.
We could dive in there.
So, um, which motivated you, but in such a strong way. I'd like to open that up just a little bit. What
Mhm.
is it that made you feel so compelled to make a life change at such a young age? It must be so impactful. It was so significant to you,
Mhm.
and maybe to your immediate family, your father and mother, and so on, and your brothers and sisters, and and that made you change that course, and you have never looked back. And to not only never look back, to propel forward. Can you talk
Mhm.
a little bit about that energy and that? Because it's certainly risk taking. I mean, if you talk about uncertainty, it's certainly dealing with uncertainty. But I
Mhm.
don't think you thought about uncertainty. If I may
Mhm.
suggest, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you said there's a thing that I want to do. There is a thing that I need to solve, and it's bigger than me, bigger than my aunt, bigger than my uncle, my family. It's for everybody who may run into this issue, and I think I should help and contribute to a methodology, a solution, or a part of a methodology, part of a solution, which can minimize the occurrence of what I
Mhm.
went through in
Mhm.
any other family, in theory.
Mhm.
So talk to us a little bit more about that, and then what I like to do is pivot from there and learn about your company, which
Mhm.
obviously we can research online and we will find out.
Mhm.
But I'd love to sort of understand that a little bit more directly from you, if that's all right.
Yeah. All that sounds wonderful. So it kind of goes back to your previous topic of risk. I thought I was taking sufficient, risk of the amounts of stress
Mhm.
that and amounts of like hard work and trusting myself to be resilient through it and taking a very particular path in aerospace. I thought that was the right risk, sufficient risk, and it did make sense. And then all of a sudden, you get perspective when life kind of just throws itself at you. And so when my aunt got sick and we navigated just reactively the way the system was designed, how health insurance does not take care of long term care needs, and we paid anything and everything for her care, including chemotherapy. We stepped in, we had to step in physically because we didn't know where to navigate for resources. And, um, and recognizing that unless you're under that immediate household, asking anyone else, even extended family members, is a really difficult logistical and emotional challenge as well, because everyone has their responsibilities under their own household. So it's very difficult to make assumptions on, what sort of support is there for you. And it was very heartbreaking for me to see because my mom came from the Cambodian genocide and I thought nothing could really tear
Yeah.
really her family apart because they've gone through such a traumatic event like countless other families. And it was eye opening to see that an event such as long term care, which is so incredibly prevalent, does tear families apart. And that's where I become so optimistic about the wealth management space in particular, because through a series of taking on the risk of an unpaven path or the risk of going down a path with so much scar tissue, such as long-term care
Mhm.
within the life and insurance in life and wealth management industry, is recognizing what do advisors care about at the end of the day when they take care of their clients. It is that they want to feel like they are taking care of their clients. It's not just letting them know that their brokerage accounts earned 8% this year, and it was previously about and investment management and like buying insurance, just like as you have to just consider that because it's money day in and day out. But then after 2008, and after the housing crisis, that's when you see an uprise of financial planning in particular, because you can't guarantee returns if the market's not doing so well. And that was a particularly very, very bad time, I think, in an economy where you see the rise of like Michael Kitces and like other individuals that have taken on the financial planning movement, so that you can now focus on adding holistic value to your clients and realizing that they don't just want money for the sake of money, but it's probably a part of life planning in some shape or form. And it would be awful to for someone to have a goal of earning $5 million, having $5 million by the time they retire in about 20 years from now. But what if 2 million of that was used towards long-term care? And so you have to not just talk about like there's a risk, like you have to get the client's buy-in to understand that you're trying to protect the quality of life that they're looking for and the legacy that they actually want to leave behind. And so that was sort of the silver lining that I found in terms of building this company, was realizing that families had all this this current and ongoing pain point, and we have the silver tsunami coming in. So the pain point's going to be ever more present than it ever was in the past. And we're not at all prepared for it. And realizing that families have aligned financial incentives to certain systems as well, whether it's a wealth advisor, to the carrier, to the government public programs that Medicaid that manage kind of social welfare. Like it's recognizing that if there's a way I could build a bridge between the family's outcomes and helping educate them on what their outcomes look like, help them make better decisions. Who else are we serving along with that? And I saw it as both an opportunity and significant risk to actually go into the long-term care space because of how much scar tissue has occurred in terms of the pretty relatively new policies that came out in the 70s and 80s. There was significant volume of those policies that were sold, and then realizing that we don't understand aging as well as we possibly could. It is an ongoing innovation that we need to figure out. And so how do we design new methodologies to try to solve for the core problems around understanding core factors that go into aging, the associated cost, and helping build a more sustainable financial models in this industry, and helping learn and innovate and educate the space on new methodologies that solve for a lot of the scar tissue that we've seen. But happy to dive deeper. That was my hope with taking my experience, realizing how prevalent it was, and trying to build something like the right solution from first principles that's sustainable at scale.
Sounds like the experience, without using the word, but I will going to use it. It's about individual sacrifice. It's about everyone chipping in and doing whatever's necessary. On some level, you're lucky that you even have the opportunity to people to chip in. In many cases, in the modern society, modern family, there are not enough people to even chip in, even if they want. I took the, as you know well, you were so kind to walk me through your app. We'll talk about that in a moment. And it asks a question, do you expect any family members to help if you happen to lose your independent living? And that was a very heavy-duty question because there are basically two answers. One answer is that if you ask my children, I don't know what they will say. The natural response is, yeah, of course, if dad is sick, we will come in and step in, without knowing what that means. They have no idea. Most people have no idea unless they've gone through an experience, right? So assumptions are often misplaced because they really haven't experienced that assumption that they're making. So to actually I put down 100 hours. That was the number that I put down on your system. Who knows? There may be only 3 hours. I don't know. So on the one hand, the children most likely going to say, yeah, sure, if my parents are need my help, I'm certainly going to be there. And
Mhm.
also, they are putting themselves in today's standpoint. Not if something happens to me or to their mom, they have children of their own, they have a husband or a spouse who are less cooperative, who are less willing to sacrifice, who are not willing to do some of the things, and they have
Mhm.
their own lives. And so your assumption is totally wrong. Wrong, not you, but I mean my assumption is totally wrong. And
Mhm.
so I think it's really difficult to even think through that in today's society, which is not the hierarchical society of Asia, where the culture almost shame you for not doing it.
Mhm.
And not only shame you, but your entire community and all the people you deal with.
Mhm.
Here, we can shame my kids, but my kids live in an environment that nobody else is going to shame her. So,
Mhm.
so it's a very different environment. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just thinking
Mhm.
out loud with you. So we'll get into your assumption in a moment. So I think number one is sacrifice. And is easy word to use, very hard word to practice. And quite often the assumptions are wrong. So that's one side. The other side is, as a father, I don't want my daughter who may be living in Iowa or Ohio or California.
Mhm.
What, I'm not doing well, they're going to fly back and take care of me. I don't want to burden them, right? Because we're no longer living in the same household with
Mhm.
with five families who are all taking care of each other and they're all watching out for each other. That whole model
Mhm.
is gone, at least not here.
Mhm.
So mutually, I think it's difficult to really expect a lot of caregiving and the long-term sacrifice. Sacrifice is not just one moment, but it's perpetual for a long period of time, either from a sense of duty, a sense of obligation, sense of love.
Mhm.
And not everybody have it. And even we assume those who have it may not have it. And I think you didn't say it those ways, but I think you alluded to it and that your assumptions were wrong. You being your family's assumption.
Mhm.
And so those are really important to think through because I know I watched my parents die. I watched my great-grand uncle and aunt die. I watched my both in-laws die. And I won't go into all the details. Each one is different. And each one end up at a different place. We all chipped in to the best of our ability. But, it's not as straightforward because this society is quite demanding. And we all run very busy lives. And are we willing to stop our career path, especially for men? Are
Mhm.
we willing to be the caregiver and sacrifice? And not only sacrifice for the moment, but sacrifice in a way that is material to our career path, material to our lives, material to our next generation,
Mhm.
right? So all those, I think, is really, I'm just taking one part of it. Um,
Mhm.
but I totally understand that this risk is a huge risk and is a money risk, and not everybody can self-insure. And a lot of people misunderstand insurance. Insurance is really a mutualization of risk, right? And to mutualization of risk, meaning that some may use it, some may not, just like auto insurance. I paid auto insurance, I don't know how long. I've never had a serious accident that I could even claim that I have made all my premium back. But that's a protection. That's a form of dealing with risks in a calm and predictable way. So in investment, the same thing, in wealth management, the same thing, is about risk management. Our lives is about risk management, right? And
Mhm.
basically uncertainty management. If I know when I'm going to die, everything is going to be a lot easier. I mean, I think so, because I can plan with certainty. But if I don't know, and I don't know how I'm going to die, and what all the things will happen before I die, I have no certainty at all. So I need to mutualize that risk whenever that I think that is economically not feasible or financially not appropriate for me to handle, or I don't have the capacity to handle, which is really what you are doing, I think, is to enlightening people. First of all, the reality of the cost, the reality of long-term care. The reality really is about aging and the inability for us to take care of ourselves. And what is that cost associated? What are the duties? So I think that's number
Mhm.
one. And then number two is, okay, now you know, what are you going to do about it? you know, so
You know, what's fascinating about like everything that you shared about the family's sense of responsibility that then crashes headfirst into um, modern society and culture.
Yes.
As well. So it's almost like you have the old guard of culture that we come from, especially those of us that aren't multiple generations of American from back from the Mayflower
Yeah.
sort of times. It's fundamentally different culture that we have to take into account that goes into our expectations, but also more importantly, we now live in modern society where the perception of risk and our risk factors are fundamentally different than the generations prior to that. I think that's the biggest reason why Water Lily is a why now company. Why does it exist now? And why is it so necessary now than it ever has been in the past? And it's because, to your point, in previous generations, in previous generations, we lived under the same roof. We had our children, and the grandchildren were all under the same roof, and we were able to find jobs locally and be a part of the local community. But now, as we've received more pressure through a variety of factors to improve our socioeconomic status or to be able to just survive, a large part of that is getting education, and probably not getting education locally where you're at, but towards the best universities that you can possibly get into. And oftentimes, it is a bubble that you now kind of like live in of high economic potential there, and to take full advantage of that education. And so we no longer have that household structure. And two is we thought, well, we could roughly estimate risk. Like we can roughly estimate like the cost of aging is, this much, and that's going to be just fine.
Yeah.
And it's not just fine. We're seeing the consequences of not taking full intentionality and accountability for the lives of our clients and our policyholders and ourselves really. We no longer have the same support system. So I think that further strains kind of having that conversation. And two is that the cost has we've lightly talked about this. The assumptions that we make is from CMS's actuarial tables where they project 5.4% compounded up into 2031. And so that is our best estimation that we could use. But you could say, if you look at nursing home costs and how that's increased over time, if you think about the advancement of AI,
Yes.
and that's going to be taking over more white collar jobs,
Yes.
what does that mean for the rest of us? We're going to be pulled into jobs where it's not so easy to build robotics. It's not so easy to build like AI, and that's where we can potentially kind of go back full circle into blue collar jobs. So there's a little bit of what is going to happen to our earning potential if possible. How can we really maximize the wealth that we've built up, be able to protect it, but how well can we understand risk as well? And one of the most significant risks in our lives is the risk of having a long-term care event, the risk of taking care of our parents, having a long-term care event, or another loved one, and the opportunity cost of doing that, and can we even afford it? And like, there's no good language for that. And so that Water Lily came out of necessity, of helping our ecosystem understand the importance of modernizing the way that we understand risk of aging.
So let's talk about your website, which is a fee-driven website, subscription-driven website,
Mhm.
which I appreciate that there is no conflict of interest, which is one of the things that I worry about all the time, and that we need to understand, why should I trust you?
That's
Why
correct.
should I trust the directionality of where your AI model drives? Is it driving more money into your pocket? Is it driving your company to be more successful? Or is it really watching out for my best interest? And it
Mhm.
is the latter that differentiates the best from the not so good. Um, so let's talk a little bit about, um, you have an algorithm
Mhm.
that draws in a lot of data, existing data. Some of it is health related because you have
Mhm.
asked health data. Do I have high
Mhm.
BP? Do I have diabetes? Do I have whatever?
Mhm.
So there is a probabilistic approach of looking forward at any one moment in time. Then you use national averages and sometimes geographical averages, depending on the zip code. You also have that information to determine what is the cost of care in all the different levels of care. So let's walk through. Actually, it's really an interesting set of questions and process that you have individuals or their advisors go through. I won't say it because I probably make mistakes, but please walk me through or walk the audience through what the experience feels like. And of course, welcome to invite everybody to get on your website to try it. And I don't think I have to be 73 years old or 68-year-old to do it. I think we should be doing it much younger. And I think we should do it more frequently because uncertainty become more certain once we realize there are updated data, which I'm sure you're constantly updating. And that probabilistically, hopefully gets better as we get closer to our later years in life where we will be user of a long-term care service. And that because time is not our friend, because time allows changes. And so as we learn from you, as we get closer, as you update the data, it becomes more and more real. So let me stop there and let you walk us through all the different components and how you think.
Absolutely. It always starts from what the problem is. It's a high level. What we've done is we've solved for a lot of the inefficiencies of long-term care planning today. When we think of like the best tools that we have, we think of the long-term care module that exists within MoneyGuide Pro or eMoney, where we ask for, zip code and we use national average statistics of, you have a 70% likelihood. For a male, it's 2.7 years on average. Let's look into a nursing home. And what's the issue with that? The issue with it is one, not only is it not going to be very precise to do that. And we actually have data that shows like it's not very precise and it's a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And for much, much younger individuals, it's a difference of millions of dollars. How you tell that narrative of risk is really important. But two is clients were not listening to that story and they weren't acting as a result. And so the only people who decided to protect against that risk were the ones that navigated the event. And unfortunately, the tools also didn't extend into analyzing insurance policies. Not every insurance policy is designed the same way. They're quite complex. And unfortunately, wealth advisors are so incredibly busy all the time. They have to rely on insurance specialists. And that specialist has a view on protecting that risk that 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 in itself makes it hard for the consumer or the client to understand how well did I protect for my risk. And so what we decided to do instead is educate so that we can enable a different action if possible. It was about taking products that may have been mispriced, existing products in the marketplace that are really hard to understand, a topic that advisors don't want to bring up because they don't know how to bring up, and creating a seamless experience that answers all of those worries as well as we can. It's about this movement to modernize long-term care planning. Everyone hates the old way of doing things. It has a lot of issues with it, and we could all agree on that. So now it's a matter of how do we create something we look forward to, that this makes sense. It's good for the client. And so the way we thought about that is it's always about the client's needs first. How well can we predict that client's needs, not waste their time? So it's a 3 to 5 minute intake survey where we grab the most predictive factors that we learned about how someone ages. That went across socio-demographic information, medical information, of course, but they're also their financial information. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, if you filled out the long form, Philip, if you want to, is we also ask about family history and your education.
That's right.
That's right. Very important factors that tell us how you're going to be progressing through your life, and when you age, how serious is that event going to look like. So that allows us to predict what someone's unique likelihood of needing long-term care looks like, their age and other need factors. And from only there do we layer in the zip code cost and localizing kind of the cost of care resources to get a precise sense of what is the cost we need to solve for and why does the cost look like that.
Have you, I may have asked you that the first time we spoke, but if I haven't, I'm going to ask you now. With the advancement of sequencing DNA, have you thought about that being an additional service where if somebody wants to have their DNA examined, give you a more scientific basis to look at a probabilistic, again, both from a disease standpoint and from a makeup standpoint, from a ratio and from a, all those type of standpoint, and how that help you to even give a a narrower probabilistic outcome. Have you thought about that? And if you have, is something that you want to implement?
Well, given my background was in
I know, I know.
um I mean that space will always be forever fascinating to me. It's been a really unfortunate the series of events that have happened in terms of genetic sequencing,
Yeah,
the advent of it, the scaling, and unfortunately the news that we see about how that data is being sold to companies where they don't have aligned incentives with consumers
yeah, yeah.
who just want better quality of care at the end of the day. Um, my answer is like if I could, even right now, I have 200 questions I would love to ask the consumer. I would absolutely I would be so fascinated. I would love to ask the consumer if they had all the time in the world. But when it comes to building out a product that people actually use, it's all about the user experience.
Yeah.
So if there's a very easy way, and a trustful way in which we can integrate genetic data, build out the studies there, I would love to do that. I think in our current modern society, it's all about it's all about the preciousness of time. And so it's about time to value. And so if I could find ways, and of course we're actively finding ways in which you don't spend 3 to 5 minutes. What if you can instantaneously fill out that initial intake form, either through an integration of medical records, integration of your financial planning software, CRM. It's all about integrations to make the process more seamless. But yes, oftentimes more data, especially medical data,
Of
the
course,
better.
of course.
Um, and being very transparent about how we don't sell that data,
Yep.
and how it's just used for the sake of educating, the families and their advisors on this topic. Um, so I'll pause and see if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think all that will ultimately, my imagination already going wild that your data set, starting with long-term care, can also get into guaranteed lifetime income because you are being predictive of how long one is going to live and how long that income going to last. It's going to go into life insurance. If you're going to spend all this money on long-term care and everything else, do you want to disinherit your children or not?
Mm-hmm.
Because right now you said 2.7 years for a man. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that means 50% of them are living beyond 2.7 and 50% are living below 2.7. And I don't know how many more than 2.7 that person is living. So he could be 5.7. The price, that the cost is significantly more, right? It's at least double. So
Yes.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So all those things is all linked. I mean, at the end of the day, is two line items. One is the standard of care or the quality of care, and the other is the cost of care. So it's about money,
Mm-hmm.
but it's related to money is the standard and the level of care we're talking about, right? So I think that the earlier one start thinking about that and integrating it into the financial planning framework, or you will call holistic financial planning framework,
Absolutely. That is
the more realistic the outcome can be achieved. And it should be integrated into the conversation. And I know when you're 30 something, you're not thinking about death and dying. I know you are 40 something, you're not thinking about long-term care at 83 because you feel that you have all the time in the world.
Mhm.
Having at least some exposure, to your point, educating and plant the seed of suggestion early, assuming you're going to be in this business for another 50 years, that the people who have done it 50 years ago and say, oh my goodness, I remember, I need to do this again and again and again. First of all, I mentioned to you, would you agree, assumptions changes. So the
Absolutely.
probabilistic, the outcome changes as we get more data, both on a sort of a macro data, as well as specific population data, and ultimately individual data. The combination of all three checks each other to say, are these assumptions valid for this individual or not? So you are really in the data science business, happen to be in the long-term care outcome business, but you are really in the data science business.
What they taught me when I was at Cal or at UC Berkeley,
Yeah.
when we first started our data science cohort, they said this is normally a master's
Yes.
degree, And I don't understand why it's only a master's degree. We should give you as a part of the undergrad class, like there's no reason why you can't learn what you need to learn. And two is that data science is all about having domain expertise as well. It's not just having that math background, computer science background, statistical background. It's like, how do you map it to, how do you apply it to a domain of
Right.
interest? That's the only time it's in which is particularly useful is you actually understand the industry that you
Use
are
it,
in.
right?
You have to use it. Exactly. You are exactly right. You have to use it. And what still boggles my mind is like I think it's just a change of narrative at this point. I think you notice how important this topic is. You're incredibly thoughtful, but there's honestly a couple of questions that confuse me. The first one is just if we do annual financial plans, is the point of it to just showcase to the client that like I am valuable, like like oh I still do work for you. Here's your performance. Is it really about reporting, or is it a way to meaningfully touch base with the client about hey, has anything changed in your life? Have you recently gone through a divorce? Have you recently had a child? Has your life goals changed? Because that's going to fundamentally change what your financial goals are going to look like. And similarly for us, if your financial situation, your medical situations, if you move somewhere else, that has predictive power to it and it
Sure.
changes fundamentally what your risk financially is also going to look like. Are we still on track with that plan? And so having a thoughtful plan there is important. And two is also recognizing I think we all, the only way we work as a company, Water Lily, is if we all are willing to recognize that the old way of doing long-term care planning just doesn't
No,
work.
no.
It's the one ways you could just sweep it under the rug, but given how expensive it is that the right like move? And then it's my job to figure out how do I make that the move of putting it front and center easy, effective, efficient, and always iterate on that so that you feel empowered to always be almost omnipotent or
Yeah,
just like completely aware of your client's life and what could affect their financial goals.
yeah. I think the way to really talk about, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, for any financial advisor, wealth man, whatever you want to call them, financial planners, they are really risk managers. That's all they are doing. They identify unique risk to you and general risks to people, and they have to help you manage it. It is their job. It is their job to identify what is the probabilistic risk and what is the associated costs and burden to go with that risk. And once you identify that, you prioritize it. I mean, there are many risks. I mean, crossing the street is
Mhm.
a risk, but you prioritize it. And then you put a dollar amount next to it. And then that's not enough because now you have told your client what the problem is. It's not enough. Your job is to help them at least find solutions that can address those risks, if indeed that resonates with them. So for me, for our practice, we do many things. We are very much in touch with our clients all the time. We know when there's a divorce. We know when there's an issue. I mean, not the moment it happened, but quite often, very, very quickly. Because they rely on us to provide them the income. They rely on us to meet specific goals in their lives. And they know that has changed. And they know that we have the relationship. And most important is the trust. Is the trust that they know that they can trust us to provide them with responses and ideas and also honesty. That if I don't know, we'll find somebody who does. And
Mhm.
so that is our job. But at the end, it's about risk management. It's about managing the various types of risks throughout one's life. And it is our job to know those risks and to share those risks. And then, but it's still at the end is the client's own decision if they believe that that should be prioritized or not. I'd rather be scared than to be stick my head in the sand like one of those birds, and it happens. It's too late. Um, and I think that the way to talk to the client about this particular thing is that you don't even have to give a reason. You say, look, I am a risk manager for you. Making money is one thing. We want to protect you on the downside for yourself, for your family, for your children, for your inheritors, whomever. And one thing that I think we should do is that I have uncovered Water Lily, and I think that the least you should do is walk through that experience. You make up your own mind if this is of consequence to
Mhm.
you or not. You don't need an advisor to walk you through per se, because your website have made it pretty straightforward. Yes, you need some knowledge, but not impossible to walk through. And to have them sort of every question that you ask in there should be reflected upon. Why is Lily asking me that question? Oh, well, maybe because, have your parents had diabetes? Have your parents have heart disease? Why are they asking this question? Well, because chances are I may have a likelihood of doing that. How old did your parents live? Did they go to long-term care? Did they need, blah, 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 all those type of things. So I think the experience itself through the questions for anybody who is interested in learning about their own risks will find it really revealing to them of the risks that they are not aware of or shied away from. So I don't think there's anything new to you, what I said. I'm sure that's well understood by your organization. I guess the last question I will ask you, because we're running up to time. Are you contributing, or are you bringing money in the door to contribute to research in that area? Or what are you doing with, you don't have to tell me what you're doing with the money. That's not my point. My point is, what are you doing to advance, to continue to in the forefront of
Mhm.
data, health, and downside protection?
That's a fantastic question.
Okay.
It's what we've done has never been seen before.
Okay.
You don't need a research institution to recognize that you've done this, or that you have patents on it,
Yeah.
or anything else. To realize with both kind of like with your both your eyes is, um, can you go through the experience, and is it just novel, and is it useful?
Mhm.
And so for us, inherent in our DNA as a innovative software company that's a first mover in this space to predict at the individual level what your long-term care needs are going to look like, not just average simulations or statistics. It's always going back to the question of like, how well do we understand aging? How well can we predict
Yeah.
it? What are the core use cases that are going to serve family members? So for us, the better we do as a company with resonating with care professionals, financial professionals, making it easier for them to talk about the solutions in this space. Once you understand the cost, how well can we help serve your different solutioning paths, the more successful we will be to be able to use that money and recycle it back into the company to continue to be at the forefront of this topic. We've been incredibly fortunate as well to be invited on world platforms at
Mhm.
World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
We were part of the first longevity cohort, and we were the one that was selected to go to Davos to speak to all these different countries that that's essentially say like, I have a problem here, I don't know how to tackle it. And sometimes the best innovations at the forefront of that are the ones that are commercialized, that are
Mm.
in industry.
Mhm.
That is the beauty of being in a capitalistic society,
Yes.
that it's tuning into what is the net new thing that you do, the innovation that you build, and the demand for it that can continue to fund that innovation.
Do you work with organization like Age Lab, getting data and understanding what they are thinking, or others like that, and understanding about, disease and disease management and longevity, all that type of things?
Fantastic question. So Evan, of course, like my co-founder, who went to MIT and was one of the youngest neuroscientist, computational neuroscientist, who started his PhD at 16.
Mm.
Um, he's very familiar with the labs,
Yeah.
and we believe right now that we can move faster
Mm.
and learn so much more,
Mm.
knowing what we all already know and build from. And of course, there are academic institutions that do reach out to us all the time about
Mm.
doing research and studies. But if you've ever worked with a lab, you'll realize
No.
the hoops that you have to jump through, and the benefit of that, it is higher risk for us and for the mission that we have than not. So that is our current stance right now. But in terms of, do we take into account disease states? Do we take into
Yeah.
account, the trajectory of like aging? If anything, a lot of the most interesting data that you'll ever see and collaborate on
Yeah.
is going to be the private data,
I see.
the
Interesting.
commercialized data.
Interesting. Interesting.
There's exceptions here and there. I think Medicare is doing a fantastic job
Yeah.
of publicizing more and more data. For us, what we see right now is that we are happy to partner and collaborate with others. I think right now we want to partner where the families are.
Terrific.
That's where the scale of impact is,
Your website, www.waterlily.com.
like the flower.
Yes.
Correct.
Well, thank you so much, Lily. I continue to be impressed. I feel that I'm the dumb one in the room. You and your partner are all teenagers who have accomplished so much, and now, of course, you continue that journey. And I wish you the best of luck. luck actually has nothing to do with it in this case. It's hard work, it's determination, it's understanding risk, understanding how to take advantage of risk to get the payoff that you look for. And when I say payoff, I don't mean money. The payoff is in achieving your long-term goal, what you are trying to accomplish. So I wish you the very best and your partner down this journey that not only helping yourself, your families, but to the world to have a better outcome, better future, better family. So thank you for all the work that you've done.
Thank you so much for having me on this platform and asking such fantastic questions.
My pleasure. It's easy to ask questions. I have no answer. So I have an easy job. But thank you. Thank you for your time. And I look forward to staying in touch with you and learning about your future and your progress.
You can always find more episodes by visiting philipchow.us/podcast or find us on your favorite podcast app. You can always leave us feedback, ask questions, or request a topic for us to discuss by sending an email to pc@philipchow.us.
Views expressed in the Tao of Chow podcast are individual opinions, and they do not represent the employers of each guest or the firm each guest is associated. Our podcasts are for educational and informational purposes only and should not be deemed or viewed as investment advice or recommendations. Please consult your personal financial advisor, investment expert, or investment fiduciary before taking any actions about your plan and investments.